Tonight, greetings, fellow travelers. As the week reaches its thrilling midpoint, we're broadcasting from the mountains of West Virginia. Embrace the spirit of adventure as you join us on this daring journey through the untamed wilderness of Let's Find Out with Diego. Bonus Overdrive Wednesday.
It's time to find out with Diego. Let's go. Ooh, yeah.
Transmitting from the mountains of West Virginia, it's another episode of Bonus Overdrive Wednesday. Thank you for taking this journey with me. On this episode of Bonus Overdrive Wednesday, I met our guest back around 2008-2009, where we were doing shows for Power Pro Wrestling out of North Carolina. He is one of the best doggone referees I ever had the pleasure of working with in the ring. Fast forward to now. He's making his rounds displaying his mobile museum of one of the greatest professional wrestling collectibles of all space and time. This is the Nature Boy Experience. All this plus more. Please welcome to Bonus Overdrive Wednesday, Wes Potter. Wes, my brother, welcome to the show. Man, it's been forever since I've last seen you.
It has, Diego. I appreciate you having me, man. It's good to talk to you.
It's good talking to you, man. And, during the pre-interview, I was pretty amazed at what it is that you're doing. But we're gonna work our way to that. So let's begin this. Last time I saw you might have been about 2009,
Yeah.
and at that point, I was tagging with Dice down at Power Pro. Dick Foley was running the operation out of that one. Was it out of Sanford, some old theater?
Yep. The Kendall Theater in Sanford, North Carolina. That's right.
And a lot of fun there. Interesting way everything was set up, but I don't know about you. Do you remember, and we're going to get into stories here in a little bit, where we always had to work one side of the ring because the audience is only on one side of the ring. Towards the back of the ring, there was that black drape where it used to be a movie screen.
Yep.
And every once in a while, the boys are back there cracking jokes as your match is going by. That's a little bit more pressure than people think, but I don't know if you ever heard some of the great things. Did that ever distract you during the matches?
Not me, but because I was one of the people in some of the matches that was trying to cause havoc, to the guys in the ring just for kicks and giggles. But no, I don't think it bothered me because I'm actually kind of hard of hearing. So when I'm out there anyway, I'm trying to follow the guys, and you guys are moving all around. The ring's making a lot of noise. The people are making noise. So I'm about deaf out there anyway. So they could have been insulting me, and I wouldn't have known it.
No, you're probably right. But actually, interesting. The few matches that I did over there, a couple times you were my referee, and you're always really good at giving direction and having a real good pace during the matches, and always a lot of fun working with you. We never have to worry about you because you were always hit the time. You're always on time. You're there where you needed to be, and it's a beautiful thing. Wrestling. The referee, I think, is criminally underrated. I think he's one of the more important people in the ring. One of those conversations we could probably have it on another show. So during that last year of Power Pro, before I get to that, when did you start with Power Pro?
That's a good question. So I don't remember when exactly he kind of officially launched, but I want to say I probably joined, maybe a couple years before that because he was kind of running independent events, throughout that kind of southern North Carolina footprint before he kind of settled on a home base. He used to run in Carthage. Wrestling fans, I'm sure, will recognize that name, Carthage, North Carolina, Moore County, where the Hardy Boys started out. Shane Helms, Shannon Moore, Champagne, all those guys. And he ran there probably a couple years before Kendall that we were talking about a minute ago. So I'm guessing 2007, somewhere around there probably.
And did you stay for the whole run?
Pretty much. I think so. I kind of missed the initial launch because the promotion was actually owned. It was an affiliate of the AWA for a while under another promoter who was based out of South Carolina. and I wasn't a part of that iteration of it. But when it transferred over to Dick Foley, that's when I came on board, probably a few months into that. So I may not have quite caught the bookends of the start and the finish, but I was definitely there for what I think was, some of the best matches and entertainment that he put on, because those were some damn good times for sure.
Absolutely, because I still have some of the posters from back then. I don't have them on my studio walls yet because I'm building a studio. We're actually putting new stuff up, putting the old stuff down. And when you look at those posters back then, some of the greatest guys in wrestling back then, whether inside the ring or outside the ring, I always have great conversations and learned a lot. Guys like Tex Mex comes to mind, and of course Dice.
Yeah.
And sometimes it was kind of like the stomping grounds for some of their better known talents that would get there for a little while. They would go somewhere else, but North Carolina seems to be like the light to the when a moth comes to a light. That was the place to be back then.
It definitely was, and even I'm not as kind of connected to the independent scene now, as I was back then. I'm sure you and I are kind of in the same boat. But I mean, again, I know I'm a Carolina guy, but we still seem to kind of be the springboard for a lot of maybe the better promotions, better conventions, where some of the top talent kind of wants to come and work before they maybe move on to one of the televised promotions, right? We're still kind of that, at least in my mind, we're still kind of one of those springboard areas. So it was back then, and here we are, 15 years later, we're still talking about it.
Yeah, and interestingly enough, because everybody talks about, well, Florida is one of the places, or Texas, but it always goes. So there's something about North Carolina that I think makes a wrestler better. I don't know, because it's I don't know, because of the history or who's been in and out, but Carolina is definitely the breeding ground for some great professional wrestling. Now, once Power Pro Wrestling died out, where did you go after that?
So I'm having you're testing my memory now to go back, because shoot, I've been doing this since 2001. So I'm coming up on like my 24th year in 2025. But I want to say after that, I was still fairly active on the Carolina independent scene. I got married shortly after that, had a kid, so that's naturally going to put the brakes on it there. But I worked for several North Carolina promotions, and I also ended up probably around that same time transitioning over to a promotion out of Virginia, probably around 2010, 2011, and I'm still working with those guys today. So they've kind of transitioned to be like my home base, I would say, probably. But I definitely kept active there for many, many years.
Awesome, man. And like I said, you were one of the best guys I had the pleasure of working with back then.
I appreciate
And
it.
which brings us now, fast forward all these years later. I've been friends with you on Facebook for a very long time, but we just recently reconnected.
Sure.
And I reached out to you because there's something very special going on right now, with what you're doing. Of course, wrestling related, which is why we are here. If you don't mind, let's walk slowly through this one, because it's a very important story in a way, because it involves a lot of history, not only for that certain wrestler we're going to talk about, but in professional wrestling over time, because it's something that very few people can wear and make look good. They either look like a wet blanket going out with one, or they look like a true professional. And I'll tell you a quick story. There was back when I first started back in 93, 94, there was a guy out of Virginia. And of course, we're all broke. Of course, $10 paydays, $5 paydays, hot dog and a handshake. And I'm sure that still goes on today. There was this guy who decided to buy like a regular robe out of Walmart or Kmart or something. And I think that he went out there and bedazzled it, and actually went out there and like he was like a Rick Rude robe, like it was, or something like that, like it was.
Sure.
But we all know that, man, dude, that looks so bad. but you can't tell them that. I mean, some people did, but they go out, you live your dream, right? So we're not talking about that kind of robe. How and when did this opportunity to be able to purchase and display Ric Flair's robe come about?
So I'll try to condense this down as much as I can, but I've kind of got to paint with a broad brush here as well. So the history of the robe and the kind of correlation of that with myself in the wrestling business is almost completely parallel. So I heard Edge say one time that, you know, the stories are fascinating as to how guys got their break to make it in the business. And he was commenting on how he liked to hear those stories because they're just the most outrageous things you can't make up. And he's absolutely right, because that's kind of my story with the robe. But if we turn the clock back to I think I want to say 97 or 98. I think I'm like a sophomore or a junior in high school, and throughout middle school and high school, I used to sell baseball cards. I'm a big sports fan and a baseball card collector, and I still am today. And so I would basically hustle baseball cards, and I had saved up some money, and I was going to buy a 1952 Mickey Mantle baseball card, which you could buy at the time for like $1,000, $1,500. Today, that card probably would be $20,000. But
Wow.
so I had hustled my money up, and if I tell you the short end of the story, to say that I bought the Ric Flair 1983 Starcade robe off of eBay in 2024, that doesn't sound very impressive. Just say, oh, well, you went on eBay, you typed in a search, and you bought it. In 1997, eBay was a brand new thing. And when you would type in Ric Flair back then, you'd get like 35 search results, right? Returned items on Ric Flair. Today, when you type it in, you get like 2,000. So, needless to say, I didn't get the baseball card. I ended up buying the robe on an eBay auction. I ended up winning the robe at the auction. It was out in Colorado. They shipped it back to me here in North Carolina, and I've had it ever since. Now, at that time, I was a high school kid. I was definitely a fan, but I wasn't in the business. After I bought it, that kind of opened up doors for me. The first person that reached out to me that was on the inside of the business, me being on the outside, was Charles Robinson, who's still works for WWE today, longtime WCW referee. He's a Carolina guy, just like we were talking about earlier. And I met him as a 17-year-old, and we're still friends today. But he was my first contact in the wrestling business. And then it kind of went from there to, like everybody else, I dreamed of being a wrestler, wanted to train. He put me in touch with George South, who had a little school in Concord, North Carolina at the time. And I learned very quickly under George that I did not have what it takes to be a wrestler. He had a very old school training approach, taught me I couldn't make it that way, but maybe there was another route for me. And so that kind of evolved into me being a referee. So you could argue that how I got in the business was because of the Ric Flair robe, right? Because that's kind of how I made my contacts or networks within the business. And then over the years, the ownership of the robe at times kind of blended in with the refereeing, because I had a certain group of folks in wrestling that knew me only as a referee, and then I had certain folks that knew me only as this, kind of archivist or this historian of wrestling. And I collected a bunch of memorabilia. I happened to have the robe. So the area was kind of gray, right? With folks that knew me as a collector, they knew me as a referee, they knew me as a fan, whatever. And then that evolved, to go back to your question, into offering fans a chance to either make some purchases of memorabilia through my website channels, or to visit some of our Nature Boy experience, Ric Flair robe experience, touring museums that we've done at different conventions and things over the years. So it's all kind of one parallel movement, right? From my time in the business to kind of where we're at today with the museum and the memorabilia, which has been popularized in the last couple of years post COVID with some of these shows that you see on Netflix, like the Golden Touch. If you followed that with sports memorabilia, that's gotten some TV time. The WWE A&E's Most Wanted Treasures, that got some TV time featuring this stuff. So it's really cool to see it kind of get its just due, right, and be put in the spotlight after having this stuff for so many years.
And that's super interesting, brother, because when I knew you, I didn't even know anything about this. You didn't
Sure.
bring it up as much back then, I believe.
Sure. I never, my thing was always from a refereeing standpoint in my work, I never wanted to kind of go around and like brag, I guess, for lack of a better word, to say, oh, I've got this. And yeah, at the end of the day, what does that really matter? When it comes time to get in the ring and the bell rings, it doesn't matter what you have. You can have the nicest pair of boots, or as Bobby Heenan said, you can have the phone number to K&H, but that doesn't make you a wrestler. So I always wanted folks to know me for my work and not necessarily, oh, well, the only reason he's here is, because he got lucky and he won this auction and he happened to meet Charles Robinson and he happened to do this and all those kinds of things. So back then, yeah, I didn't really talk about it as much, and I kind of wanted my work to speak for itself. And today, though, it's kind of become in vogue to talk about that kind of stuff. So,
Yeah. And talking about getting your gear made, back when finally when I started, actually, when I had money in my pocket, and K&H, they make great quality stuff.
absolutely.
But I kind of went a little bit of a different route, and I actually had Linda and Adrian Street were the ones that made my wrestling gear.
Oh, yeah, they did good stuff,
And
too.
absolutely, they have the greatest, wildest designs I've ever seen.
Yes.
I bought so many. I still have them, man. And every once in a while, well, no, I'm not gonna get into that. But my wife has seen me in them, and she said they're just better off to leave them as storage. So that's a story for another day. Now, talking about the mobile museum, and well, before I get into that, the question you've probably been asked a million times is, and I'm not talking about just regular fans or super fans. I'm talking about people in the business. Has anybody just said, "Hey, man, I want to buy this off of you"?
Yeah. That's definitely been a scenario pretty much since I bought it. I remember right now. You got to remember, I'm like a 17-year-old kid, right? And right after I bought it, back in those days, you could see people's contact information on eBay. It was just the email address, but it was visible. You could just click on the link and send the person an email. And I remember shortly after I bought it, I got a message from someone. Now, I don't know if they were serious or not. We'll just play devil's advocate and say that they were. And they pretty much within, I'd say, less than 8 hours of me buying it, made me a ridiculous offer to sell it almost immediately. And I turned it down as a 17-year-old kid. But what that told me was, I thought, oh, wow, we're on to something here. You got a deal on this thing. And then throughout the years, there's been people in the business and people outside of the business that have wanted to purchase it, right? Even at one time, I was in semi talks with WWE because they, the talk on the street's been for a while, they want to do some kind of museum, right? And they've done kind of mobile museums at Access. And so they've actually borrowed some of my memorabilia for that over the years. So yeah, there's always been interest. I think I've definitely fielded offers and declined advances over the years, for sure.
Yeah, that'd be kind of a hard thing to get rid of. Now, talking about the robe and the pay-per-view that it was on, which pay-per-view was that on?
So it's everybody calls it the Starcade 83 robe, right? Which was the night that Flair won the title for the second time against Harley Race in Greensboro. That's kind of the most notable, I think, event that he wore it in, right? was Starrcade 83. But what folks don't know is that uh, most folks don't know he actually wore that robe to the ring for his first 3 world championship wins. When he beat Dusty in Kansas City in September of 81, he was actually wearing the robe that night. And then he, of course, wore it the second time against Harley in November of 83 at Starrcade 83. And then I think it was 84 when he got the title back from Kerry Von Erich. I want to say that may have been in Japan or it may have been in Texas. I can't remember, but he wore it to the ring for his first 3 NWA World Heavyweight Championships. So that kind of speaks for itself, I feel like.
Yeah, and when you buy, it's one of those things about buying memorabilia that you got to be very careful. And being that you've been doing this for a very long time, what are the things to look out for when you're buying memorabilia? Because going back to the Carney days with wrestling. Have you ever? I'm not going to name any names, but have you ever experienced seeing this? Whether it's XYZ wrestler or even a promoter, when you start seeing them selling 8x10s of other people's works, or let's say,
sure,
become pictures of the Road Warriors or Greg the Hammer Valentine, and they're all autographed. But there's been a few times where I've seen some shadiness of people just back then going to Kinko's and just hand jamming these awful autographs. So what are we to look out for when we're going to go out and try to purchase some of these items?
So today, that's one good thing that I think has happened, not just for wrestling memorabilia, but memorabilia in general. As technology has advanced, the hobby of collecting and the business of memorabilia and collecting has evolved, and part of that has come into play with some of these shows like I talk about that you see is you hear the word authentication. And back when I bought the robe, now I have to say, like, the gear that guys use, a lot of times that stuff's customized, right? There's not, and it's not something easy to replicate. You're talking about like Adrian Street stuff, and his wife made a ton of stuff and for him, and it's exclusive to him, and it would be almost impossible to replicate. And if you know the business, you know an authentic when you see it. If you don't, and we're talking about autographs or cards or photos, when I bought that robe, there wasn't the term photo match. That wasn't even a thing. Now, I would buy something and then I'd go look for a video or a wrestling magazine that had a picture of Flair wearing this pair of boots or wearing these trunks. Now they call that photo matching, right? It didn't have a label then, but we have things like photo matching. We have third parties that do autograph authentication. They do all of these things. And if you're buying something from like a reputable dealer that is known in the business, like right now, obviously Ric Flair is still active signing autographs. His agent is Ryan Fitterman. And, Fitterman has dealt with Nolan Ryan, Larry Bird, Dennis Rodman, Mike Tyson, Pete Rose, Ric Flair. So he's a well-known, reputable dealer. If you're buying something from somebody like that, it's going to be authenticated, and he's going to check all the boxes for something that you're looking to buy like that.
Man, that's a great detective work. And yeah, I guess you really have to, because it's not only do you want to make sure that what you're buying is authentic, but your reputation is on the line too.
That's right. Absolutely.
And with the other items you have in display, because I had the privilege of, you sent me some of the pictures of what you have in display, because you don't only just have the robe, but you have other things as well. What else do you have there?
Oh man. So the robe was one of the first things I ever got. Like I said, I was a big sports fan, big baseball guy. But baseball memorabilia, even then and still today, is like, it's just light years ahead of most other sports, including like football. Like a Mickey Mantle 52 tops baseball card is going to sell for like $25 million, graded a 9. And there's really no other piece of memorabilia out there that's going to touch that. So all that stuff was way out of my reach, even back then when prices were lower. So wrestling at that time wasn't as far as the memorabilia space it was kind of the redheaded stepchild, right? It was just kind of outside of the circle. People didn't consider it. It wasn't taken seriously. So you could buy this stuff. I mean, outrageously cheap. WCW had just shut down. A lot of guys were out of jobs. Dusty Rhodes sold off a lot of his memorabilia. He sold off robes. He sold off trunks, boots, his vest from the 70s. You hear that story, I think, has been a part of a recent WWE storyline where Cody talks about his dad selling his watch, his Rolex watch, and that was during that time period. So they're selling watches, they're selling their gear. Bobby Heenan liquidated a tremendous amount of stuff. Randy Savage liquidated a ton of stuff. And at that time, it just wasn't that popular. I mean, they were still popular as personalities, but people didn't see the value in their memorabilia. And so I picked up a pair of Dusty's trunks from Survivor Series. I want to say 91, maybe. They were towards the end of Dusty's run with the polka dots. These were black trunks with red polka dots, but post the yellow polka dot phase. I had a pair of tights from Randy Savage that he wore in WCW. Actually have the pair of trunks he wore at WrestleMania 3 against Steamboat for Savage. And then I had Harley Race's boots from WrestleMania 3 against JYD. Of course, the Flair robe. I had a couple pair of Flair boots, a couple pairs of Flair's trunks, a Bobby Heenan jacket, a Grand Wizard turban from the 70s. You remember Ernie Roth, the Grand Wizard?
Yes.
One of his. So I covered the whole, space of wrestling going back to, I've got an original golden bobby pin from Gorgeous George, a Georgie pin from the 50s, along with an autograph. So at one time I prided myself because I had a collection that covered about 7 or 8 decades, right? All the way from the 1950s up until today. I had something from each decade in the business. So it was kind of a broad brush there.
That's awesome. You got a lot of things probably the super collectors themselves don't even have. And going on that part, so obviously other than Flair's robe, if you could name a couple of other wrestlers that you think come close with the awesomeness of a robe like that.
In terms of memorabilia, I think Randy Savage is even today, even though he's been dead, probably a decade now, he's one of those guys I think that still kind of his legacy lives on beyond wrestling. And I'll give you an example. I was getting gas at the gas pump the other day, and they've all got those screens and they're all playing these ads while we're pumping gas, and a Slim Jim commercial comes on and it's got all the WWE current talent, but that voiceover and the visual of Randy Savage pops up on the screen. And I thought, man, he hasn't done a Slim Jim commercial in 20 years or 25 years, and he's still out there. So he's still kind of a pop culture icon, right? Like he's kind of crossed over into that mainstream, even though he's been dead for 10 years. So I think Savage is probably still up there. And honestly, I think maybe even today more than Hogan, right? I think somehow Savage is in terms of relevancy, right? Even though Hogan obviously is still alive and can contribute, I think his legacy's done a great job of being preserved over time. So anything of Savage right now is really increased in value tremendously over the years.
And I think a lot of that is a lot of these wrestling biographies have come out there lately.
Yep.
The Randy Savage story is so interesting that
Yes.
I think it's like rediscovering Led Zeppelin or the Who.
Yeah.
Or it's kind of like that. Everybody's like, wow, this is really awesome.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that's a great analogy because, I think some of the music I listen to, I like a lot of 80s music and Journey and stuff like that. And, my daughter's, she's about to be 13 on Sunday, and she'll listen to Journey, and she's never lived in a world where, Steve Perry's been on stage with Journey touring, but yet she knows who they are. She knows their music. So it's that same kind of thing you're talking about. That's it exactly.
It's awesome. It's one of those things. I think that, and maybe it's because I'm showing my age, but I just think that these iconic wrestlers, so I'm gonna go from like mid to late '70s, '80s, and up to mid '90s. I think they're gonna live on forever. These characters are gonna be loved forever, more so than maybe some of today's. Because I think now it seems it's kind of like a wrestling factory, but back then it's something a little more special. But
Yeah.
that just could just be me being 50 years old now. I don't know how I got here, but here I am.
No, I think you're onto something there. It was definitely more individualized, more personalized, and obviously, I think that's going to stand the test of time a little bit more than today's wrestling factory.
Yeah, man. And and before we go, I'll tell you one of my favorite, if you don't mind, wrestling collectibles. I don't really collect a lot of stuff, but for some reason, my suit is full of collectible things, all different type of things. If it's Batman, if it's wrestling,
Yeah.
Bigfoot, UFO, it's all great stuff, right? It sets the mood for the shows. But some of my favorite things now to purchase, and I actually had three when I was growing up. I kept it forever. So I had the old LJN ones, the rubber ones.
Yes. Yes.
I had a Piper, Corporal Kirshner, and a Macho Man, and I did lose Piper's kilt, and they're all beat to hell because when you're a kid, you don't really think about collecting.
That's right.
But I found a great store down in Strasburg, Virginia. It's way down yonder, and they had these LJN ones at a great price. So I picked myself up a Don Morocco. I picked myself a King Kong Bundy. I picked myself up a Jimmy Hart, man. So out of those wrestling collectibles from that time, which ones are your favorite? Which ones do you own?
Um, as far as like figures or just memorabilia in general.
Oh, we'll go with the figures because those things,
Oh,
they
man,
seem to be back in fashion again.
they are. What's funny is so when I tell people this, they have a hard time believing it, but I didn't actually grow up a wrestling fan. I wasn't like wrestling wasn't on my radar as a kid. I was a Masters of the Universe guy. I was a Ninja
Ah,
Turtles guy later
me
on.
too. Yeah.
Um, and that was it. Like I owned one wrestling figure that I know of as a kid, and it was one of the later Hasbro Hulk Hogan's. I still have it today. Um, but in my collection now, I do have a Hasbro Dusty, which is one of the more harder figures to find. I've got some of the Galoob WCW. Of course, a Galoob Flair is out there. And um, to tie it back to the road really quick, um, I don't remember the year, but within the last 10 years or so, WWE produced a line of Funko mystery mini figures, and Ric Flair was included in that, and he's actually wearing the robe in that little mini figure. So there's like a little figurized version of the robe from that standpoint. And then the WWE Classics line did uh, a Classics Ric Flair in the Starcade robe. So that figure actually has the robe as well. So I have all of those, and then um, from the LJN standpoint, I was always liked the way those Andre the Giants looked. So I do not have the black uh, trunks with the black strap. That's an extremely rare LJN Andre the Giant, but I do have the blue trunks Andre the Giant. I've got Piper and Jimmy Hart and those guys too that I keep in my personal collection. But yeah, I love all the old stuff. If it's old, I'll pay that more attention than something new.
And I still think somewhere I have some of my old tops WWF ones too. So one day, we'll sit down. We're gonna look at these things and talk about it, if you don't mind. And for the listeners of Bonus Overdrive Wednesday that want to learn more about the Nature Boy experience, where you're going to be set up at, what state you'll be at, where can they go find out?
Yeah, so there's a couple of platforms. If you're on Facebook, you can look us up. We're actually under Ric Flair's Starcade Robe 83. I mean, just that simple. That's probably the most up to date version of what's going on, or different memorabilia that we sell. We actually offer plaques, trading cards that feature like relic swatches from different robes that I've owned over the years, including the Starcade robe. And then flairrobe.com, www.flairrobe.com is our main web page, and that features pictures, info about the robe, touring dates, merchandise that's for sale, anything you need to know, it's all going to be right there.
Awesome, man. And brother, let me tell you, it's been a pleasure talking to you and catching up after 15 years.
Absolutely.
And we'll have to definitely do it again. And when you start picking up some extra things, man, please come on by and let's talk about the history of some of these items that you have.
Be glad to do it.
Thank you, my friend.
All content on this broadcast is a property of Diego the Podcaster and is served directly from our servers with no modification, redirects, or rehosting. All celebrity impersonators are paid performers. The impersonated celebrities do not endorse or promote any views or opinions expressed by our guests, Diego the Podcaster, or Bonus Overdrive Wednesday. The information shared on Bonus Overdrive Wednesday is provided on an as-is basis, with no guarantees of completeness, accuracy, usefulness, or timeliness.